The siren tore through the embassy at 2 in the morning, and I was awake before my mind even understood why. My name is Daniel Whitfield, and I was the youngest human liaison ever assigned to the Compact of Bound Stars. That night, I was standing on the observation deck of Trade Station Cthulhu, 40 light-years from Earth, staring at a message that should not have existed. Every light on the defense board had gone from green to black, not damaged, not attacked. Simply gone, as if someone had reached into the heart of Earth's entire orbital shield and switched it off. I pressed the comm panel with a shaking hand. "This is Whitfield. Confirm status of Earth defense grid." Static answered me first. Then a voice, thin and far away. "Grid is dark, sir. All stations unresponsive. We don't know if it's a fault or if it's them." Them. For 107 years, humanity had lived inside a treaty, signed with an empire, that called itself simply the Dominion. It was not a friendly name, and it was not a friendly peace. It was the kind of peace you get when a much smaller nation signs whatever paper the much larger nation puts in front of it, because refusing is not survivable. A century ago, humanity had one system, a handful of ships, and no real chance against a power that had conquered 40 other worlds before ours. So our leaders had smiled, signed the treaty, and asked for nothing more than to be left alone. The Dominion agreed, because helping themselves to our system later cost them nothing today. They filed us away as harmless. A backwater, a colony of clever animals who built good bridges and asked polite questions. They never came back to check. That was the mistake. Not cruelty, not carelessness in the way people usually mean it, just simple arrogance, the kind that assumes weakness never grows. I ran down the corridor toward the main viewing hall, past crew members frozen in front of dead screens, past officers shouting into comms that gave them nothing back. My translator earpiece crackled, and I heard the voice of Ambassador Yultha, an old friend from a species called the Corvi, bird-like and sharp-eyed, who had negotiated trade routes beside me for 3 years. "Daniel," she said, her feathers visibly flattened with tension when I reached her. "Do you understand what is happening?" "I'm trying to," I said. "The whole grid just vanished from the boards." "It did not vanish," she said quietly. "It was silenced. On purpose. Look." She turned the display toward me, and I felt my stomach fall through the floor. 41 Dominion dreadnoughts had translated into human space, holding position just past the orbit of Neptune. Their formation was a shape I had only ever seen in an old training file back on Earth, shown once to every liaison before they left home. A formation with a simple, ugly nickname among analysts: the Silencer's Approach. It was not a formation built for a fair fight. It was built to walk in, turn off everything that could resist, and deliver an ultimatum before the other side even had a chance to blink. A broadcast opened on every channel across the station, translated instantly into a dozen languages. The voice was calm, almost bored, the voice of someone who had done this exact thing to other worlds before, and expected the same result now. "People of Earth, your system has been selected for reassignment under Dominion Expansion Protocol. You will stand down all remaining defenses. You will surrender your outer colonies at Mars, Ceres, and the Jovian stations. Compliance ends further discussion of this matter. Resistance will be dealt with according to established procedure." I felt Yultha's wing brush my shoulder, a gesture of comfort her species used rarely, and only meant sincerely. "I am sorry, Daniel," she said. "I know what established procedure means for a world that says no." I did too. I had read the reports. 3 species before us had said no. None of them existed as a united people anymore. But something in my chest refused to accept that this was the end of the story, because I remembered something else. I remembered a rumor, quiet and never confirmed, that used to circulate in certain closed rooms back on Earth. A rumor about the Kuiper Belt. About 17 shipyards nobody outside a very small circle was ever supposed to know about. About decades of quiet, patient work happening far from any Dominion eye, hidden behind ordinary mining claims and boring cargo manifests. I had always assumed it was just a story people told each other to feel less afraid. I was wrong. The station's main display flickered, and a new set of signatures appeared on the board. First a handful, then dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, spreading out from points across the outer solar system that had never shown as anything but empty rock and ice. Ships. So many ships that the display struggled to render them individually and switched to a density map instead, a soft red bloom expanding outward from 17 separate locations, like flowers opening all at once. Yultha's beak fell open. She made no sound at all, which for a Corvi was the loudest possible reaction. I stood frozen, watching 4,000 vessels rise out of a century of silence, every single one of them built without a single word leaked to any outside power. Funded quietly, crewed quietly, tested in total secrecy, and kept dark and waiting through generation after generation of engineers who knew this day might never come but prepared for it anyway. The Dominion's 41 dreadnoughts, ships that had never once lost an engagement in 600 years, drifted at the edge of Neptune's orbit like sharks that had just swum confidently into a net they never saw. On the open channel, the calm Dominion voice returned, and this time it was not calm at all. Unknown contacts detected. Identify yourselves immediately. No one answered them, because somewhere back on Earth, in a bunker built decades before I was born, there were people who had waited an entire lifetime for exactly this moment, and they were not interested in a conversation. They were interested in results. I watched on the board as human ships closed the distance in perfect, practiced formation, communicating through tight, encrypted bursts that the Dominion sensors could not crack in time to matter. It was not chaos. It was not desperation. It was choreography, rehearsed so many times in simulation that every captain knew exactly where to be and exactly when to be there. They planned for this, Yultha whispered beside me. Not just prepared, planned, down to the day. I don't think it was the day, I said slowly, understanding hitting me all at once. I think they planned to be ready no matter which day it happened to be. The first Dominion dreadnought tried to retreat the moment it understood the numbers arrayed against it, engines flaring bright as it attempted a jump back to safety. It never got the chance. A wall of smaller human vessels closed the gap before the dreadnought's jump drive could finish charging, disabling its systems with a coordinated strike that left the massive ship drifting, powerless, but whole, not destroyed, just stopped, the way you would stop a much bigger animal, without needing to harm it, if you had the tools and the patience to do it right. One by one, the same thing happened across the formation. Dreadnought after dreadnought found its engines cut, its weapons locked out, its crew left sitting inside a perfectly intact hull with absolutely nowhere to go. It took 11 minutes. 11 minutes to bring down a war fleet that had subdued 3 other civilizations without needing nearly that long. The channel that had carried the Dominion's ultimatum only minutes earlier went quiet, then crackled back to life with a very different voice. Younger, less certain. The voice of someone who had clearly never had to deliver this kind of message before. This is Fleet Commander Aldrich Voss of the Dominion 3rd Expansion Fleet. We are requesting terms. Terms. Not surrender exactly. Not yet. But the first crack in 100 years of assumed superiority. I turned to Yultha, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to get down to the surface. I need to hear this directly. She nodded, already moving toward the shuttle bay with me. I am coming with you. History should have more than one species as witness.
What?
The shuttle ride down to Earth felt longer than it should have, every minute stretched by the sheer weight of what I had just watched happen. Below us, the planet turned peacefully, city lights glowing along the coastlines exactly as they had the night before, as if nothing at all had changed. But everything had. We landed at a private strip outside a coastal city, where a car was already waiting to take us to the coordination center, a low concrete building that from the outside looked like nothing more than an old weather station. Inside, it was something else entirely, rows of analysts and officers working in calm, practiced silence, screens showing live feeds from every disabled dreadnought. A woman in a plain gray uniform met us at the door, introducing herself simply as Director Nora Halden. She looked tired in the way of someone who had spent decades preparing for one single night, and had finally gotten to see it through. Ambassador Whitfield, she said, shaking my hand firmly, and Ambassador Yultha, thank you both for coming. I imagine you have questions. 107 years of quiet building, I said. How did nobody find out? Nora allowed herself a small, tired smile. Because we told almost no one, including most of our own government at any given time. Compartmentalized funding, disguised as mining operations, deep space research, even debt repayment programs. 17 yards, each one believing for decades that it might be the only one, so that even if one was ever discovered, the others would remain safe. And the ships themselves, Yultha said. The crews. How do you train an entire fleet in secret for 100 years, without anyone noticing thousands of missing people? Careful recruiting, Nora said. Volunteers who understood exactly what they were signing up for, and exactly what it would cost their families in terms of secrecy. Officially, most of those crews are still listed as remote research personnel, off-grid mining engineers, deep survey teams. Their families knew they had dangerous, isolated jobs. Most never knew the full truth until tonight. I thought about that for a long moment, the sheer scale of patience it must have taken. Entire careers spent training for a battle that might never come. Entire lives lived quietly in service of a single possible night in the future. Why now? I asked. Why did the Dominion move against us tonight, after 100 years of leaving us alone? Nora gestured toward a side screen, where an intelligence report scrolled by, dense with technical detail. Their scouting reports on us are, by our best analysis, at least 90 years out of date. Their intelligence division apparently decided a species this far from their core territory, this quiet, this cooperative, simply was not worth the resources of continued surveillance. They filed us away as understood, and moved their attention elsewhere. They stopped watching, Yultha said softly. Because watching cost them something, and we never gave them a reason to think it was necessary. That was rather the point, Nora said. A younger officer approached with a data pad, interrupting gently. Director, Fleet Commander Voss is requesting a direct conversation. He's asking for whoever speaks for Earth. Nora looked at me, an unreadable expression crossing her tired face. Ambassador Whitfield, you have spent 6 years as our voice among the stars. I think it should be you who finishes this conversation. My hands were not entirely steady as I stepped up to the comm station, but my voice, when it came out, was steadier than I expected. This is Ambassador Daniel Whitfield of Earth. I understand you're requesting terms, Commander Voss. The reply came a few seconds later, the delay of real distance rather than hesitation. Ambassador, I will speak plainly, since plain speaking seems to be what tonight requires. My fleet is disabled, not destroyed. My crews are alive and, as far as I can tell, entirely unharmed. I do not understand how a species we assessed as having minimal military capability accomplished this. You assessed us 90 years ago, I said. A great deal changes in 90 years, Commander, even for a species you once considered harmless. There was a long pause before he answered. It appears we underestimated the value patience holds for your people. We never wanted this fight, I told him, and I meant every word of it. For over a century, we kept our end of that treaty. We never asked for territory beyond our own system. We never interfered with Dominion trade routes or Dominion worlds. All we ever wanted was to be left in peace, and we built everything you saw tonight only because we were never entirely certain that peace would be respected forever. And if it had been respected forever, he asked, what then? For a fleet of 4,000 ships. Then it would have sat quietly in the dark for another 100 years, I said honestly. We are not interested in conquest, Commander. We are interested in never again being a species someone else can simply write off as harmless and forgotten. Another pause, longer this time. When Voss spoke again, some of the formality had left his voice, replaced by something closer to simple exhaustion. What terms do you propose, Ambassador? Your crews are released unharmed, effective immediately, along with your ships once their weapons systems are formally decommissioned, under joint inspection, I said. In exchange, Earth requires full recognition as a sovereign, self-defended power within the compact of bound stars, full territorial rights over our system and its colonies, and a formal, public update to every piece of Dominion intelligence that currently lists humanity as a minor, non-threatening species. You want us to admit we were wrong about you, Voss said. I want the record corrected, I said, so that no one makes the mistake of forgetting who we are again. The silence stretched out long enough that I began to wonder if he had cut the channel entirely. Then, finally, his voice returned, quieter, almost reflective. I will carry these terms to Dominion Command myself, Ambassador. For what it is worth, I do not believe they will refuse them. A fleet that could disable 41 dreadnoughts without a single lost life, ours or yours, is not a fleet anyone sane wishes to test twice. The channel closed, and for a moment the coordination center was completely silent, as if everyone inside had been holding their breath together without realizing it. Then, slowly, quietly, the room began to exhale. Someone near the back let out a shaky laugh. An officer near the main board pressed both hands over her face and simply stood there for a moment, overcome. Nora Halden closed her eyes and allowed herself, for just a few seconds, to stop being a director and simply be a person who had spent her entire adult life waiting for this exact outcome. Yultha turned to me, her sharp eyes bright with something I had never seen in a Corvi before. Genuine, open astonishment. 100 years of silence, she said. 100 years of smiling at every summit, signing every treaty, offering every hand in friendship, while quietly building the one thing that would ensure you never had to use any of it. We didn't want to use it, I said again, because it felt important that she understood that part fully. That was never the goal. No, she agreed, but you made certain that if the day ever came when you needed it, no one could take that choice away from you. I looked back at the main display, where the outline of 41 disabled dreadnoughts still drifted quietly at the edge of Neptune's orbit, their crews alive, their ships intact, everyone walking away from that night instead of being carried away from it. Somewhere far above us, 4,000 ships that had waited a century in total silence were finally, for the first time, visible to the entire galaxy. 107 years of peace had ended in a single night. But watching that quiet room slowly fill with disbelief and relief in equal measure, I understood that something new had begun in its place, something built not on fear or conquest, but on a simple, patient truth that the Dominion had somehow managed to forget across a century of looking the other way. Peace, when it is real, is never weakness. Sometimes it is simply the quietest, most disciplined kind of strength there is, waiting patiently in the dark for exactly one night to prove itself, and never needing to prove itself again after that.